Do it.
Do it!
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your pal NOMZ here, and today we begin with just a quick reminder. If you're a fan of the channel and are hungry for more content, be sure to check out these two channels that are appearing on your screen right now. Both will be linked down below in the description. The one on the left talks exclusively about video games. The one on the right is an archive channel for the podcast we host here on Anomaly Inc. Just letting you know what's happened to them and where they've gone and where they will continue to be going, because I know there's a few of you out there who's been asking. So if you're interested in those channels, hit the pause button, go check them out, and then come back and finish this video.
And for the rest of you...
Let's talk about The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 4, and I promise I'm not bullshitting you, I really actually liked this episode.
I know, right?
Yep, you heard me. And as many of you are well aware, I have not been the biggest fan of this season. The first two episodes kinda sucked, being perfectly honest. The third episode was okay at best. It had its fair share of highs and lows. Episode 4, also known as Chapter 12, is titled The Siege and was directed by the legendary Carl Weathers. And this episode, and most particularly its directing, was balls out awesome. I do have some issues with this episode, but most of it is actually praise. Let's start with the intro, and I thought it was kind of a mixed bag. Mando letting Baby Yoda try and fix some critical wiring on his ship that could possibly disable it in the middle of outer space. Why he does this instead of just going straight back to Navarro in the first place, I have no idea. But yes, I know it's meant to be played for laughs. Believe it or not, I do have a sense of humor.
I know, right?
And yeah, seeing Baby Yoda fiddle with the wiring was amusing, but it just, again, makes Mando look kind of stupid by giving Baby Yoda that responsibility. I would really appreciate them making less Baby Yoda jokes at the protagonist's expense. But anyway, it cuts back to easily the best part of this series so far, in my opinion, and that, of course, is Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune. A former rebel shock trooper who was born on the planet Alderaan, now renowned throughout the galaxy as a catastrophic tragedy at the hands of the now disbanded Empire. We see Cara Dune take on a group of bandits and thieves who have taken the old Mandalorian armory in the sewers of Navarro as their hideout. These bandits are about to kill some sort of meerkat creature and eat it for some reason. You'd figured they could find a decent meal that isn't a live animal, but okay. Anyway, Cara Dune shows up, and honestly, upon rewatch, this action scene is piss poorly choreographed. She opts to wrestle a blaster from one of the bandits and use that blaster against the others. She then uses a blunt object to disarm the other blaster-wielding bandits and beat the shit out of them. And then right before she kills the last bandit, she reveals to have had her own blaster the whole time. Why didn't she just use that in the first place? Anyway, the meerkat takes a liking to her and she feeds it before telling the creature she has to give all of the stolen goods back to the rightful owners. And why that is becomes clear in a moment. The next scene is a reunion of our three main characters, I guess we can call them friends, from Season 1 of The Mandalorian. Those being Mando, Cara Dune, and Greef Karga. They opt to repair his ship for him. Greef even says he'll get his best people on it. And then he goes ahead and asks the first two individuals he sees to work on Mando's ship. These two randoms were already out there just tinkering with some kind of mechanical object. They are supposedly his best people, and they're just sitting there outside of town. Okay, this is going to feed into one of my biggest issues later on, so remember this. Anyway, Greef and Cara give Mando a tour throughout the new Navarro, and we as the audience get to see how it's changed, how Mando's actions have impacted the galaxy for the better. Mando tells him he's surprised by how this small war-torn town is now flourishing after the fight with Moff Gideon in the Season 1 finale. Greef tells him he's been dealing with clerical work most of the time, but Marshal Cara Dune is the one responsible for cleaning up the town. They ask him what happened to his ship, and why it's in such terrible condition. Mando tells him that he had a run-in with the New Republic, and we learn from Greef that those New Republic officers shouldn't have been there since Mando was traveling through the Outer Rim. He also brings up an excellent point, that the Outer Rim was too wild for even the Empire to control, so why did the New Republic think that they can control it any better? I like this because even the Old Republic had virtually no presence in the Outer Rim, which was cemented by Star Wars Episode 1, of course. That film distinguished between Republic-controlled space and Hutt-controlled space, which is why I raised an eyebrow during Season 2, Episode 1, when the Marshal said, when the Empire fell, the occupation on Tatooine ended. Because while the Empire was present in the Outer Rim, it didn't really have control over Hutt-controlled planets. Anyway, it's now become quite clear that Greef Karga is some kind of mayor to this settlement, which is very strange since he was essentially head of the Bounty Hunters Guild in Season 1. This is quite the character change, and at first I thought this was ridiculous, but when I went back and saw Season 1 and Moff Gideon actually mentioned that Empire records show that Greef Karga was a former magistrate of some kind, this actually made a lot more sense. For those of you who don't know, a magistrate is essentially someone who governs and enforces the law, and I'm assuming in the case of Greef Karga that was for small settlements. And that's exactly what he now appears to have done with Navarro. Enforce the law, drive out the scum, and transform it into a respectable community. Merchants, trade, ship repairs, and now a thriving populace. A returning character later on even calls Greef Karga a magistrate, so, well, that's what's happened. Now, I do like this, though it is a very far cry from the character in Season 1, especially when we last saw that he was still adamant about the bounty hunter business. He even says that some of his favorite people alive are bounty hunters, offering Mando his choice of assignment, only for him to swiftly decline. Now, I would chalk this up as a flaw if they never mentioned what his past occupation was. I am, for once, willing to give the show the benefit of the doubt, and say maybe we'll hear more about his decision to leave the bounty hunter trade behind later on. But anyway, Mando follows Cara and Greef to the Empire Loyalist safe house that Moff Gideon almost entirely destroyed, and much to everyone's surprise, the building has been completely restored and repurposed into a school for Navarro's youth. It even has a protocol droid teaching the children about the state of the galaxy, and for some reason, he's teaching them about the Kessel Run. Disney, could you please stop referencing the goddamn Kessel Run? Nobody gives a shit. You made a whole movie about it, remember? Seriously, just stop. But other than that small pet peeve, I love this idea and how it's executed. Mando is hesitant to leave Baby Yoda at the school, true to his character of always keeping an eye on his foundling. Greef insists on leaving Baby Yoda at the school because in his words, you don't want to take a child where they are bound to be going. Hey, it turns out the show has some common sense. Bravo. Anyway, Baby Yoda is left at the school, and I have two more bits of praise to give for this scene. The first is the scene of Baby Yoda using the Force to take a greedy child's candy from him. I honestly got a good chuckle from that. Please, Disney, if you're gonna have Baby Yoda front and center in this show, have him use the Force more often, please. Or actually, just do something with him besides just having him sit there and looking cute. You know, come to think of it, Baby Yoda might actually be the ultimate heel villain of the series after all, and the twist is going to be that he's actually evil. I mean, think about it. He's a ruthless carnivore that eats unborn fetuses, he steals food from children, and if nothing else, always remember, he choked his first bitch before Mando did. Just kidding. Baby Yoda's done some good stuff too. Minus the stupid inclusion of giving him the Force heal ability. Thanks, Rey. But aside from that, I just want Baby Yoda to be utilized better overall. Something I forgot to mention is Greef gives Baby Yoda a very warm embrace when he sees him again. And I thought this was just Disney trying to shill their toy, and maybe it was. But when you consider that Baby Yoda was actually the creature that saved his life in Season 1, it's not hard to see why Greef has grown very fond of the creature. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to praise about the school scene was if you listen closely, you can actually hear the protocol droid mention some great details about the galaxy and how it's currently structured. Admittedly, I had to turn on the subtitles to get this information, but that's why it was very smart to use a school for this scene. Mando, Cara, and Greef are already very well acquainted with how the galaxy works. It's hard to give new information and exposition for simple details that the audience is currently missing without either showing the characters in certain situations or having some very heavy-handed exposition. However, these children in the Outer Rim are just as clueless as the audience is. So having the protocol droid just spout exposition the entire time in the background doesn't feel out of place at all. You can pick up on the following details if you listen very carefully, and I guarantee like 99 out of 100 of you missed this. The details are as follows. The galaxy has 5 major trade routes. The one which was used in the Corellian run was called the Hydian Way. One such trade route connects the outer rim of the galaxy to what's called the core worlds. There are several other regions in the galaxy: the mid-rim, the expansion region, the inner rim, the colonies, the core worlds, and the deep core worlds. The capital of the Old Republic is called Coruscant, which exists within the core worlds, meaning the core worlds is in Republic space. However, the New Republic has a different capital planet called Chandrila, which is also located in the core region. All of that from this one scene. Details that the characters likely would have never delivered to the audience so directly because they already know these details. But the scene accomplishes just that. All I can say is well done. Honestly, bravo. We then see that Grief has taken a subordinate. Turns out it's that blue alien motherfucker that I hated with an absolute passion in the Mandalorian Season 1 pilot episode. Now, he was annoying then, and he's annoying now. But what I hated most of all about his role in Season 1 was how pointless he was in that episode. Despite soaking up massive amounts of screen time in the pilot, the opening, the first impression for the Mandalorian. And he was just along for the ride, tearing the show down as he went. Anyway, we learn his name is Mithril, and Grief has employed him as his bookkeeper, since that was his occupation. He refers to it as a polywall, whatever the hell that is, and Grief is apparently letting him work off his debt. Apparently he has 350 years to work off, which doesn't make much sense at all considering Grief looks like he's a human in his senior years, and will be dead long before those years are up. Unless the blue guy's race ages much quicker than humans, and maybe they have shorter years on their home planet, I don't know. Throughout the episode, there's a running gag of Mithril doing these favors for Grief and having extra years shaved off his debt, which kind of feels like they just wanted to rip off Pirates of the Caribbean.
Park your gills right there until I say otherwise.
I'm starting to dehydrate, boss.
Okay, how does 30 more years off your debt sound?
I wager 10 years. I'll max 10 years.
What are they wagering?
Oh, the only thing we have years of service.
Magistrate Cargo was generous enough to let me work off my debt.
350 years, but who's counted?
You're not making any sense at all.
Oh well, at least Disney's stealing from themselves for a change. Anyway, the blue guy and Mando are surprised to see each other, and there's this one little detail, this one tiny thing that, strangely enough, convinced me that this whole episode and story was actually planned out from as early as episode 1 of season 1. When Mithril actually sees Mando again, he, in human terms, literally has the shit scared out of him.
I think I have to use the vac tube. I mean, I can do it here, but if you've never seen a fledgling Mithril evacuate your thorax, you're a lucky guy, trust me.
I believe you two have met.
I'm surprised to see you here.
Anyway, like I said, he's still annoying, but at least he has purpose in this episode. He's essentially Grief's whipping boy, and also their computer hacker for the base they are about to infiltrate. At this point, Grief and Kara level with Mando, telling him they need his help, and they need it while they are having his ship repaired. Mando is somewhat resistant to it at first, but ultimately agrees, since he's their friend. Hey, finally Mando's got a good reason for helping people out. Kara shows us a map of Navarro, and makes it very clear that their location is what's known as a green zone, completely safe. Which is odd, considering she just killed a whole group of bandits in the opening beneath the sewers, but oh well. I suppose she means free of Imperials. She says there's a very old Imperial base which has been on Navarro since the Empire expanded their grip throughout the galaxy. She also says that's where Moff Gideon acquired his troops when he occupied Navarro back in Season 1. The base is no longer receiving any attention from the Empire, but it's not abandoned either, meaning the base is still a threat and something's still going on there. And to ensure Navarro remains safe, they gotta take it out. Mando agrees, but logically asks what kind of resistance there will be there, and they tell him it's not manned by much more than a skeleton crew. Kara also adds that they just have to find the reactor and blow it up. Well, doesn't that sound easy? We shall come back to that. They arrive at the base, and rather than just dick around waiting for Mithril to hack the elevator shaft, Mando flies up to the landing pad above and kills all of the troopers on the balcony, which is like 500 feet in the air, and he opens the elevator shaft from the inside. Once his friends join him inside the facility, it becomes quite clear that this base isn't as empty as they once thought. Grief then tells Mando the reactor should be in the heat shaft, which is essentially a lava shaft, and if they drain the coolant lines, the base will be engulfed by the lava. We also cut to the heat shaft and see that the Empire has constructed the most impractical reactor in history, and it's all done for a reference to the tractor beam control unit on the Death Star from back in Star Wars Episode 4. That was also placed inside a deadly shaft with absolutely no guard railing. As I was watching this, it became abundantly clear to me that it was almost as if the base was made to be sabotaged, because all they had to do was turn off the cooling and the unsuppressed lava would consume the base. Why build the base on a volcano in the first place? I understand it's meant to be a remote, secret location, and I understand Navarro is a volcanic planet much like Mustafar is. But again, why build your base directly over an active volcano? Okay, now allow me to play the other side of the fence. The ease of sabotage for the base. How could it be beneficial? Well, let's go through it. If the New Republic discovers the base, it guarantees to wipe out all trace of the Empire, denying the New Republic any access to Empire assets or any crucial Empire intel. Also, I neglected to mention before that the Empire security officers have what's called a code cylinder that allows the reactor to be accessed in the first place in order for it to be sabotaged. Look, given the sensitive nature of the base, I suppose it can be somewhat understandable why they built the base the way they did. I just thought their job to sabotage it was way too easy. The shootout during their escape is pretty entertaining and mostly well done. On their way out, we see two Imperial officers trying to wipe data drives in accordance with Empire protocol, which is kind of stupid given that the whole base is about to go up in flames, but I suppose it pays to be thorough, and in the Empire you follow protocol or you die. That's been established. Anyway, Mando's company kills both of them, and finally the audience receives a revelation about Baby Yoda and why the Empire is after him. Mando and his friends realize that this facility isn't a military operation, it's an experimental lab that possesses stasis tubes for some mysterious life forms that they were growing there. Mythrol hacks into whatever's left of the data hive, and it reveals an outgoing message to Moff Gideon from the scientist who experimented on Baby Yoda back in Season 1. Mando is shocked to see that Moff Gideon is still alive, especially after he blew up his TIE fighter back in Season 1's finale. At first he doesn't even believe it, but Mythrol tells him the recording is only 3 days old. The message reveals that they were using what they reference as the child, obviously meaning Baby Yoda, for his extremely high midichlorian blood to transfuse it into whatever abomination they were growing in those tubes. The scientist also mentions a test subject, but the identity of that individual remains a mystery. Also, I gotta say, the music that plays during this scene is perfect. That sharp violin really drives home that feeling of, oh, shit just got real. Now, I need to address the elephant in the room. We all know where The Mandalorian is heading in its timeline. It's heading towards Disney's Star Wars sequels, and the riding train wreck that was The Rise of the First Order, The Butchering of the New Republic, and the balls-out insanity of resurrecting Emperor Palpatine and his aborted test tubes of Supreme Leader Snoke. It's one of the worst trilogies ever made and lacks almost a complete understanding of its source material and proceeds to run every intriguing plot thread and character firmly into the ground. Disney owns the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Disney owns The Mandalorian. The fact that Baby Yoda's blood is very likely being used to help create Supreme Leader Snoke, which feeds into the nonsensical plotline that is that character, is not The Mandalorian's fault. If anything, to me, it feels like The Mandalorian is trying to bring some sense to the backstory of the sequel. And while that's commendable, the problem with that is that that trilogy is a complete and utter lost cause that Disney are just too stubborn to admit. It really is a shame because as good as The Mandalorian could be, as intrigued by this development as I am to watch the next episode, we all know exactly where it's going to lead eventually, and it just flat out sucks. I'm not one to endorse retcons, but the sequel trilogy desperately needs to be completely wiped from the canon. Look, the Disney canon is a fanfiction anyway, since George Lucas had pretty much nothing to do with it, so retconning fanfiction in my eyes is less of an offense, but the current mainline Star Wars Disney canon is killing fan excitement for anything new that takes place in the time era that The Mandalorian is set in, which is post-Return of the Jedi. We need the sequels gone, or else the franchise is never going to recover. Sure, it might bounce back somewhat, but it'll never reach the height we all know it can. And some people might be pissed off with me for this, but I do not fault The Mandalorian for trying to adhere to established canon. As bonkers as we know it's probably going to get, I do want to see what they are going to do, and if they manage to salvage anything at all from the Disney sequel trilogy. Though The Mandalorian would be thriving much more if it didn't have to accommodate those films. Anyway, After realizing that Baby Yoda's blood is being used to grow abominable organisms, Mando jets back to Navarro to keep him safe, while the rest of his friends hijack an Imperial hovercraft tank and use it to escape. The speeder bike canyon chase that turns into a TIE fighter assault and eventually an aerial dogfight with the Razor Crest as Mando returns to join the fight and save his friends is some of the best action I've seen in Disney Star Wars to date. Carl Weathers did a fantastic job directing it, and the production value on display is what I'd expect from this show's budget. After thwarting the Imperial attackers, Mando tells his friends that he needs to get out of there before Moff Gideon realizes what's happened, so he says farewell and heads off into space. Shortly after, the New Republic officers show up and inquire about what happened. Greef tells them about the Imperial base, but then they inquire about the Razor Crest, since Mando's a fugitive after all. And this bit reminds me why Chapter 10's ending was really stupid. But Greef tells him that the transporter droid got it wrong because they can't tell any ship model apart from pre-Empire. He also adds that this isn't Coruscant. While I think this is really poorly worded for the audience, especially since we keep hearing the term pre-Empire a lot in this series, and supposedly that has something to do with how the technology is distinguished, but we aren't really told why. I'm assuming what Greef means is that the droids he uses on Navarro aren't as well programmed as the transponder droids on the former capital of the Old Republic, which has existed for far longer than his little settlement. While that still doesn't make much sense, for the sake of time, I'm going to give the show the benefit of the doubt once again. Outside, Cara Dune is feeding the meerkat creature she freed in the episode's opening, and the Republic officer has a few words with her. Having checked her records with the New Republic, he knows her history as a soldier and that her home planet was destroyed. He tells her he served in the Rebel Alliance when Alderaan was destroyed, and was curious if she happened to lose anyone there. She simply responds with, "I lost everyone," which pretty much confirms what most of us in the audience already inferred from Season 1. I like Cara Dune's character. She has the utmost hate for the Empire, but she's hesitant to join up with the Republic again after deserting and finding new purpose, looking after the settlement and others who are also wronged by the Empire. The New Republic officer leaves behind his crest, a gesture that she's always welcome in their ranks if she changes her mind. Finally, it cuts to an Empire Star Destroyer in a shot that is clearly trying to be reminiscent of A New Hope. Yeah, just continue to throw out any and all subtlety, Disney. And then it shows an Imperial officer who receives a transmission from the mechanics that worked on Mando's ship, and they tell her that they've installed a tracking beacon on the Razor Crest. Okay, Disney, so you're telling me that Greef Karga's best mechanics, the two aliens that were just hanging around outside Navarro, just so happen to be working for the Empire? Disney, come on now, seriously. Why do you make it so hard for me to like this series? Again, I will play the other side of the fence on this one, and I'll offer a valid counter-argument. The Empire would no doubt have spies working for them, and Navarro was the last place Mando was sighted, and it's where Moff Gideon was defeated. So I suppose it's feasible that they sent some informants to the settlement in case Mando ever decided to return, or what's actually more feasible is that they already had those informants during the Empire's covert occupation of Navarro in Season 1. And then they just gave their informants the model of Mando's ship and told them to be on the lookout. Still, those informants didn't have to be the only two individuals waiting on the outside of town, who just so happened to be Greef Karga's best men. Anyway, the Imperial officer tells her informants that they will be well rewarded in the new era, which, okay, talk about a long time to wait for a paycheck. And then she goes to tell Moff Gideon what has happened. Moff then asks if Mando still has Baby Yoda, and she tells him he does, because her source confirmed it. Wait, sorry, what? Unless the editors cut out a piece of her holographic conversation with the mechanic, he never even once mentioned Baby Yoda. But oh well, you can't have everything, I suppose. Maybe she's talking about a different source, I don't know. And then it has that awesome violin theme as Moff Gideon turns around to some mysterious troopers in black armor. According to my Mandalorian friend here, they are called Dark Troopers. Yay! I still haven't watched Star Wars Rebels. And then finally the episode is over. And it was mostly a damn good episode, with a few nonsensical moments, not to mention some eyebrow-raising moments that at first glance seem absurd, but once you apply some critical thinking, they make a bit more sense than you originally thought. But most of this episode, however, nailed these three important things. Number one, it progressed the story and finally gave the audience some answers regarding Baby Yoda. Regardless of the eventual destination, it's still appreciated. Number two, the action was damn near flawless this time round, except for Cara Dune's opening fight with those bandits. But apart from that, the action was fantastic. And number 3, it gave us a truckload of payoffs for Season 1. Hell, even that annoying blue alien that I initially hated and still kinda do, even he had some good screen time. We see that the events of Season 1 actually went somewhere. And as we saw the episode unfold, we got a boatload of reasonably well-delivered story, character establishment, and world building. And even though the final scene of the episode is probably my biggest problem, and what I would describe as a cheap as chips way of getting the bad guys back involved, I can't say I'm not intrigued for the next episode. This show has been on a bit of a theme park ride of good and bad. This season has been mostly bad, but it's certainly been an improvement over Season 1. And especially with this episode, let's hope it keeps getting better. Anyway guys, those are my thoughts on The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 4. Thanks very much for tuning in. This brings us to the end. And I'll be sure to cover Episode 5 when it comes out. If you have time, however, consider staying for the outro. Firstly, I want to give a shout out and thank you to all of my patrons and YouTube members for all of your contributions to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate the generosity and your support. If you'd like to become a patron or channel member, the link to Patreon is in the description, or you can just press the join button and become a channel member that way. Secondly, if you haven't already, please check out the channel's Discord server. What Discord basically is an online community where followers of this channel go to congregate and talk about a range of different topics, ranging from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and so on. Check it out at your leisure, and who knows, maybe you'll make some friends along the way. I've also linked a video about Discord in the description in case you had any questions. Also, as mentioned before, if you are looking for more content, you should head over to my secondary channel that talks about video games, and my archive channel if you're a fan of the podcast we host here. Both of the channels are linked below. Hope you check them out. And finally, here's one last thank you for staying till the end of the video. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time.